Well, thank you, ladies, for joining us tonight. And you guys are gonna talk to us about risk. So I gave them a little heads up that you guys kind of handle our risk for the bank. You kind of look at things and make sure that we're all in compliance. And then it's a much higher level than any of the people that are going to be here tonight. So you should be able to handle any questions that they might have. So with that, I am going to turn it over to Sarah, and Kate and I will let you guys introduce yourselves.
Fantastic. Can you see the screen?
We can.
Okay, terrific. So my name is Sarah Lundy. I'm the compliance manager here at Chelsea Groton Bank, and I'm joined by Kate. Would you like to introduce yourself, Kate?
I am the Director of Risk Management here at Chelsea Groton, and exactly as Miria said, our department encompasses a lot of things, but it all boils down to managing risk across the entire enterprise. And yes, it is imperative that the complexity of your risk management program matches the complexity of your organization. So the way we do it here at the bank wouldn't be anything like what you're looking to do, but hopefully this presentation will help you to get a good understanding of the overall topic.
Absolutely. And with that, I think we can jump in. So the first thing we're going to talk about is very obviously, what is risk management? So risk management in general, it's the identification, evaluation, and then the prioritization of risks, and then also what you do to minimize, monitor, and control the probability or the impact of those risks. So a risk management strategy is really important to your business because it helps to protect it from different types of risks. And if you create a plan for mitigating those risks, then they can help you be successful no matter what the situation. There's several different types of risk, and there's more even than we listed here, but these are the kind of the big categories, the big bullet items. The first is financial risk. So this is basically any sort of financial effect that something could have on your company. For example, if you have just one customer, or you have a very small customer base, or you have a lot of debt, there is high risk in both of those things because they can jeopardize your cash flow if one of them were to fall through or fail. The next is strategic risk. And sometimes a company has to assume risk in order to move ahead, in order to generate greater returns. So every opportunity, though, even the ones that are potentially lucrative, could carry risk. And having a plan in place beforehand definitely helps you decide whether it's worth it or whether you don't think that it would be worth it and the risks not outweigh the reward. The next risk we'll talk about is reputation risk. This is pretty straightforward. Everybody knows that in the age of social media, reputation is very, very important, and maintaining yours has a lot to do with the success of your business. We also have hazard risk, and you may recognize the term from hazard insurance, which some of you may have on your homes. This has to do with property risk, legal liability, workers' compensation, basically things that you could get insurance for. It has a lot to do with fires or floods, employee illness or injury. So that's hazard risk. And then finally, operational risk. This is the risk that's inherent in your day-to-day activities. So these are things like technical failures, a server outage, process failures, like a lack of cash control among your employees, or human error like a data entry that could lead to a product shortage.
This is the category that's the biggest catch-all. There are so many facets to operational risk. And if you think about it, it's just all the different types of risks that are presented by running your operations, and the people and the technology and your vendors, et cetera. All of that can flow right into operational risk.
Absolutely. So the risk management process is made up of 4 steps. The first is to identify and analyze your risk. The next is to evaluate those risks. Third is selecting how to manage them. And fourth is monitoring and reviewing them. So we're going to dive a little bit deeper into the first step, which is identifying and analyzing your risks. This is something that your business plan, which I understand you're developing in this class, should help you with. It'll help you identify the areas where you may have risk, the areas that would impact your ability to continue your business and grow. And then also conversely, identifying and analyzing your risks can help you develop your business plan going forward and help you decide where to allocate your resources. So there are different kinds of risk, and we're going to talk about internal versus external risks. This may look a little overwhelming because there's a lot of information here, but we wanted to give you some examples of internal risks. These are things that you as a business owner can control. There's facilities, so you have control over your building site, you have control over your office space, the appearance of your building, the maintenance of your building, the phone lines, utilities, those sorts of things. They all present risk if something were to go wrong with them, but you also have control over it. Theft and fraud are things that you have control over for the most part. They're major risks to businesses, so we'll talk a little bit later about things that we can do to counteract some of these risks. Illness and death. So a business owner and employee could be ill for a day. They might be unable to work for months if they injure themselves. The death of a principal in the company could pose a risk to continued operations. So those are things that you want to consider and plan for. Finances. So as I'm sure you all know, your cash flow is the lifeline of your business. So when you have an unexpected cost, it can affect your ability to conduct business in general. So that's definitely something that once you do, for the most part, have control over. You have control over a lot of aspects of your finances. Low employee morale is another internal risk. So you want to make sure that your employees are happy. There's less of a chance that they would be negligent or that they would conduct like a willful act of fraud or theft. Having a happy employee or a well-supported employee can help prevent against like an inventory error or any type of error really that would affect your sales or your operations.
I'm sorry, Sarah. Another thing to think about with that one is higher employee morale increases the likelihood that you'd keep your employees, so retention. And everyone knows that training a new employee is very costly, very time consuming. So there's a risk to losing well-seasoned employees as well.
Big risk. Yep. And then the final internal risk that we've got listed here is equipment and information technology risks. And this is a big category as well. Old equipment may run slower or require more maintenance than new equipment. The new equipment could require adjustments to work as you intended it to, or it could take time to get used to. If you have a company vehicle, it may wear down and break down. Equipment or IT failures could lead to downtime, especially if you don't have a plan B. What other internal risks can a business owner control? Do you have any ideas for things that are within your control that are risks?
No.
Something to think about, and especially when you're thinking, and as Sarah sort of alluded to, equipment and information technology, that could be as simple as you use your cell phone to maintain your social media presence. It could be the laptop that you use to do your accounting. What if it fails? What if everything is on that particular device? So it's thinking about some of those risks. Just, it can be small, again, complexity, small scale, large scale. It all depends on your particular operation, as do all of these other topics as well.
Absolutely. So we'll look at external risks. We've got market changes. So your competitors are part of market changes. Wholesale costs could go up or down if you're selling a product. Oil and gasoline prices could affect your costs and those of your vendors. So it's something that is not in your control. Your talent, you don't have control over whether your employees leave to go to another competitor's shop and take customers with them. As we talked about in the other slide, keeping your employees happy is within your control, but ultimately you don't have control whether or not they decide to leave and take customers with them. Market pressures could also make it difficult to attract new talent. So there is, there's plenty of other companies.
What?
I'm sorry, what was that?
Are you on mute?
I don't believe you are.
And the other piece on that is market pressures maybe make it difficult to attract new talent. It also could increase the cost of attracting new talent, as we're certainly hearing about in the news today. So,
thanks, Kate. Local ordinances. So if your business is subject to any sort of regulation, that could change. That could be a risk. Changes to the community. So how is your business going to fare as your community changes, as it ages, as the population spending habits change, as the incomes of your community change? Vendors and suppliers. So for example, your rent could increase. You could suffer supply chain issues. Your vendor could fail you in some way. And then we've got weather and natural disasters. So these could shut down your business for a short period or close it for a longer period due to damages or vendor issues. They could also increase your insurance costs. For example, I would guess I would consider it kind of a natural disaster, but the pandemic, my husband and I own a barbershop. So we were mandated to close at the beginning of the pandemic. So those are definitely realistic things that could affect your business.
and the other thing to think about with this is it's thinking about your vendors as well. So it's down that supply chain. So the natural disaster may not be localized to where you're located, but if your vendor is impacted, how does that impact you? So we have some thoughts about diversification, and if you're really relying on a specific vendor, you need to think about some of those opportunities to switch things up.
Great point. So once you've thought about your internal and external risks, you can do something called a SWOT analysis. And this could either be formal or informal. It could really just be a brainstorming session where you think about your strengths, your weaknesses, both of which are in your control, and then your opportunities and threats, which are, again, external risks. So it's a good way to really see if maybe you overlooked a risk, or if one of your strengths could counteract a threat, or an opportunity could counteract a weakness. Kate, do you have anything to add about a SWOT analysis?
I think you've really encapsulated it, and I definitely want to emphasize this is just a good opportunity, and it doesn't matter if it's on the back of a napkin. It's just or just a conversation if you have partners in your business to just walk through. So what are our, as Sarah did a great job of pointing out in some of these questions, what are the best advantages that our company has? Okay, well, what do we really need to work on? What is it that our competitors do better than we do? What does the market around us have in the form of opportunities? And exactly as Sarah was describing, thinking about how these various categories can counteract or support each other. It's a good exercise to go through.
Absolutely. And then I do have a note here that some opportunities could also present risks. We just assume that an opportunity is like a golden ticket. It's a great thing, which it can be, but also they come along with risks that we have to think about and we have to prepare for. So with that in mind, can you think of any positive situations or opportunities that you could think of that may prevent risks? I'll start with one. So as I mentioned, we own a barbershop. A positive situation or an opportunity is that we recently had a barber come to us and ask if we were hiring because they wanted to work with us. That's great. That's an opportunity. It's a positive thing. Our name is out there. They want to work with us. But then we also have to think about the risks. Do we take in enough money to pay this barber? Are we busy enough to warrant adding another person in our shop? Do we have enough space in our building? All sorts of different things. Will our insurance change? How will it affect our payroll? There's a lot to consider even with an opportunity.
I heard a great story that falls right into this on NPR the other day, and it was a company that does floral arrangements, but it's an online business. And last year in the pandemic, they did a banner business over the holidays, various Mother's Day, etc. But with the delivery delays, they encountered their deliveries were coming in multiple days past the holiday that they were supposed to be delivered on, and they had to make good with their customers. So it ended up they did make a profit in the end, but they suffered a very large loss because of those service recoveries they essentially had to consider. And as they move forward into Valentine's Day of 2022, they're already planning to not go as big in terms of their growth that they could have potentially capitalized, but they decided it wasn't worth the risk of trying to scale up that fast, and then also thinking about those downstream issues that once their product left them, it was out of their control.
And I think along those lines, since you're asking about, positive things that might present risks, is a really quick growth situation. So if you are really successful at the onset, and you have a lot of business that you're having a hard time keeping up with, that could be a risk to your company, because even if your product is amazing and everybody wants it, if you don't have the capacity to handle that, it can leave a bad taste in people's mouths. So,
Mary, that's a great example. Even with something like, I want to make sure that we're hitting every social media platform and making sure that we're making a big splash. But if you can't keep up your presence and respond to comments and make sure that if someone were to complain on there, that you were actually able to respond in a timely fashion, that may not be the best approach. You might be better picking and choosing something that's more within your scope to handle at first, and then building up to more and more and more as time allows.
And I'm glad you mentioned that. On Tuesday, we're having a lunch and learn about social media, and we're going to talk about how you should not go for everything, but pick and choose what works for you. So
on the same wavelength.
That was a great tie-in. So the next step in developing your risk strategy is to evaluate the risks that you identified in the previous step. So what you're going to do is rank your risks based on the impact to your business were they to happen, and also the likelihood of them happening. So the highest rated risks should get the most attention and the most resources. This is a really good opportunity to bring in your team and have them, look at the risks that have been identified. They could possibly identify even more, and they could help you understand, oh, you really don't, understand 100% what we do in this area. If this were to go down, it would have a huge impact on us. So this is really where you want to get your team involved.
Sarah and I were talking about this particular area as we were preparing this, and it is really all about what is the severity, so the impact of the particular event or the risk occurring, but it is also the likelihood, how frequently that does this occur. We were talking about the pothole. A pothole is really a small thing, but if the pothole, and what if the pothole was just in front of your parking space as the owner of the company? Well, the severity of it's still just a pothole. You can deal with it as a person. What if it's in your customer parking lot right as everyone comes in? It's just a pothole, but it's happening all the time to every single one of your customers. The risk kind of eked up there. So you have to look at both together. It's the severity, but it's also the likelihood of it impacting, and who is it impacting? Is it just impacting you, or is it just impacting, or is it impacting your entire customer base, something like that? Versus severe, but doesn't happen all that often, like a tornado coming through our area. It's still something to plan for. Maybe you want to think about your plans around that, but the likelihood of it happening is on the lower side.
Right. If you were to compare a hurricane versus an alien invasion, an alien invasion would probably be much more catastrophic than a hurricane in most cases. But what's the likelihood that that's going to happen? Whereas we do get hurricanes, and sometimes it could be several times a year. So that's where you're really going to want to put your energy and your resources.
Right. And we look at that too. We've got hurricanes versus snowstorms. Well, snowstorms happen practically every winter, usually not that severe, but we have a plan for it. You know, we should, because they happen all the time.
Right. So once those risks are identified and evaluated, then you would want to measure them for your potential impact, which is what we're talking about now. And the complexity of your measurement should be relative to the complexity of your business. So here at the bank, we have algorithms and different things that we use to rank our risks, you know, low, medium, high, what's that based on, what do we measure? For your business, it may be just a simple conversation, or, you know, writing it down in a notebook. Okay, what are the top 5 biggest risks, top 10 biggest risks, and what do I need to do in order to compare them? And then what are some of the lower risks where they kind of need to be in the back of my mind, but I don't need to do a whole lot to prepare for them because they're not huge risks to me. A good example is water damage. So if your business, if you have a storefront and it floods, you may need to clean it up, reopen it, continue operations. So you have a decision to make. Do you clean it up right then, which could put a strain on your budget immediately? Or do you not clean it up and not get in a professional to help you with it, and then down the road you start to have mold issues, and then nobody wants to come into your shop because it smells bad and it's soggy and it's humid, and then you start to lose business, and then they start to tell people about how bad your business smells. So you kind of have to think about loss, or the cost, I should say, of mitigating a risk immediately versus the loss of future profits. So that's also something to weigh out and consider. So within risk management, there is a subset of planning called business continuity, which is about having a plan to deal with emergency situations so that you can continue to function with as little disruption as possible. Way back, we used to call it business resumption. So to resume our business after a disruption. But right now, we're really focusing on business continuity because we don't want any downtime. We want to be able to continue right through whatever this crisis is, and hopefully it won't stop our operations for any period of time.
It's really planning for the ability to pivot and to have backup plans, and how we're all going to coordinate around them.
Yep. So we've got some things to ask yourself when you are planning for an emergency. Can your organization operate without computers, without a copier, fax machine, files, inventory? What kind of special equipment do you need? Cash registers or card readers? Do you need gas, power, water, internet, phones? Can you operate without access to a building? Could you operate in an alternative location? These are all things that a lot of us had to think about at the beginning of the pandemic, because we weren't working out of an office, we were working from home. So what kind of systems and structures did we need in order to be able to continue our operations? Other considerations have to do with staff, customers, and vendors. So these are the people. Can you meet payroll if your income is interrupted? And if yes, how long can you meet payroll? Are your employees able to commute to work? So if there was some sort of earthquake, you know, would their route to work be disrupted? Are you easily accessible to the public, to our customers, employees? And then also, how do you let your employees, your customers, your vendors know what your status is? How do you communicate with them? If your only way of communicating with your customers is via your Facebook page, what if Facebook goes down? What if you don't have access to a computer? Do you have a plan B? And what is that plan B? And then finally, you've got your operations. So can you operate without access to your buildings if they're damaged? So again, can you work from home or an alternate location? What do you need to recover first? So is it most important that your delivery drivers are available, or is it most important that your chef is available to cook the food for the delivery in the first place? What is the order of operations in order to get things back up and running? If you ship products, could you ship them? Could you provide services? Do you have workarounds if your post office is closed? Would certain scenarios affect the demand for your products and services? So again, to go back to the pandemic, Amazon and other retailers are having a hard time keeping up with demand because we're all home and we're all shopping in our pajamas. So that affected demand in a way that was unforeseen. So would your business be similarly situated or affected? And then also you need to consider, would you be able to survive a loss if your business was closed or inaccessible for 3 to 7 days? Or unfortunately, in the case of our business, for 3 months. So what's required for your business to continue operations? This is something that you should be aware of because you don't want to wait until an emergency happens or you need to switch your plan to have a plan. You definitely want to think about this ahead of time and kind of just have a playbook ready to go. You want to make sure that you have your, you know what, we're going to talk about a plan in a minute, so I won't skip ahead of myself yet. So similarly to with your other risks, with business continuity, you're also analyzing the impact to your business. We call this a business impact analysis. And some things that you should consider are lost sales and income, delayed sales or income, increased expenses. That could be overtime, it could be outsourcing, it could be shipping, any fines that you could incur if you are impacted by a business continuity event. Penalties or the loss of bonuses with one of your vendors, customer dissatisfaction or defection. So if you are unable to operate, are you going to lose customers? And then the delay of new business plans. So if the universe were to throw a wrench in your plan, would that delay expansion? Would it delay hiring somebody else? Just want to really measure how important these risks are to your business.
And Sarah, if you can pause there for just a second, this is really what you need, these sort of thoughts, these larger categories are what you need to think about when you're on the prior slide when Sarah was talking about prioritizing your functions. So we would lose our customers if we didn't do X, Y, and Z. Well, X, Y, and Z then are probably priority number one if customer dissatisfaction or defection were one of your larger concerns, one of your larger risks. So you look at all of these different things in the context of the various types of functions that you have to do to just keep your business going. And that really is very, very dependent on the type of business that you're running and ultimately what your goals are, what your business plan has in it. So that's how you put those two pieces together.
The next step is risk control management. So now it's time to put your plan into action. And we're talking about, when we're talking about controls, we're talking about a tool that you're using, whether it's an action, a process, a system that you're using to prevent, detect, or correct a risk. So you want to not only know what your risks are, but how you'll respond to them. And you'll definitely want to keep your business plan current by readdressing any changes and assessing new risks. So this is where creating a plan comes through, particularly for business continuity. You want to have a business continuity and a crisis communication plan. So what are you going to do when it comes down to it? If you have employees, you'll want to make sure that they're informed of the plan. They know that one exists and also what to do and what it tells them to do. What we do here at the bank is we do training regularly so that they're aware of it. And then we also do drills. So we'll do like a mock hurricane where we'll sit down and we'll kind of talk through, okay, how would this affect opening the branches? How would this affect the rest of us getting in the building? Would we have to call any of, our facilities managers, anything like that? You should also consider developing a sheltering in place or evacuation plan and have any emergency supplies on hand that you might need. Definitely review your insurance coverage to make sure that you're covering the right things based on the risks that you've identified. Consider the risks associated with your surroundings, so trees, fences, electricity lines, and then also consider the steps that you could take to lessen risks associated with them. And then also consider your building content. So are you manufacturing something that requires chemicals? Do you have potable water? All those sorts of things.
Right. Are you a restaurant that has a huge refrigerator, freezer, and if the power goes out, you lose your entire inventory of whatever's in there? That would be a higher risk for you and something you'd try to plan for. Again, generators, things like that would be the controls to put in place.
Absolutely. So here we've got a few more things that you'll want to consider, things to monitor periodically. Your competition. So you can at least know what your competition is doing, even if you can't control them. So are your prices in line with them? Are you losing sales to them? Are they better at attracting and keeping valuable employees? Accounting and cash control. So this is where you really have some control over fraud, theft, and errors. You might want to consider setting up an audit trail and dual verification. So don't have the same person do everything. You would want to have a second set of eyes to protect the business and then also protect your employees so that they don't get into a situation where someone could think that something was improper. Adjusting levels of authority to job duties. So if you have a computer system, just giving people access to what they need in order to do their job and nothing more. At the bank, we do that, and like I said, it really protects the business, but it also protects the employee. And then also conducting periodic audits. So for us, this is a very formal audit process, obviously. But for you, it could be looking at your bank statement. If somebody else is bringing deposits to the bank, take a look at your bank statement and just make sure that it adds up. It's different depending on the size of your business, but just scale it to what your particular business needs. And then also you'll want to consider employee management because your employees are important to the success of your business. They're probably the most important thing if you have employees. Some controls that you could put in place are using pre-employment screening, whether that's getting a recommendation from somebody or a background check, depending on your industry. Providing your employees with job descriptions and lists of their duties so that they know what they're responsible for. And they know what your expectations are. Providing performance evaluations. So again, they know how they're performing. They know that you're both on the same page as far as their performance goes. And then also being involved, making sure that you understand how your business operates, particularly if you're hands-off in certain areas or you don't have the level of expertise to fully understand. At least be visual, be around and let your employees know that you're there for them and you support them.
I would put training into that boat as well. There's so many areas that training is just, and it doesn't have to be a formal program. Actually, Sarah has a great slide that's super applicable. We have formal training programs around information technology and information security. I won't steal her thunder on these, but it doesn't have to be as formal as something that we would have here at the bank, even for your size business, no matter what it is that you're doing. Just think about what might your employees need to be trained on, and how complex does it need to be. It could just be that you all have lunch every once in a while and have a great discussion around, okay, so if we ever had a hurricane, this is what we're going to do. That's training. That's perfectly fine.
Yep. So information technology systems present their own special set of risks. And so here we're offering you a few controls to help you manage those risks. The first is to safeguard login information. So personal login information shouldn't be shared with anyone, either outside the business or with another employee. Your employees and your own passwords should be complex, unique, and changed frequently. The Federal Trade Commission has a lot of great information online about how to keep your personal information safe. That would also apply to passwords. Utilize system protections. So use firewalls to stop intrusions, use software to scan for viruses or other irregularities. Make sure you are installing recommended patches on time. And really, some of these things you could say, oh, I don't have the money for that, or it seems very expensive to keep up with it. But just consider the cost of a hacker or a virus that could shut down your business for hours or days or weeks. I would say that that's probably much more costly than the preventative maintenance is.
And some of that can be very straightforward, just making sure that your laptop has the automatic patching little checkbox checked, so that if a patch is pushed out to your computer, it's actually going to happen. Making sure that if a platform that you use like Facebook changes its security parameters, that you actually know about that and go in and check and see what it might be. So it's just keeping up to date on the tools that you're actually using.
Absolutely. As I mentioned earlier, your user access to your information technology system should be specified to your role. So somebody that ships out inventory or accepts returns should have different access than somebody that's in accounting and has access to the bank account. So here we call that the concept of least privilege. So you only give as much access as they need to perform their role. And then on top of that, if you have the ability for a supervisor to override something in the system, or you have a secondary person that's able to make changes within your system, just review it periodically and make sure that there haven't been any errors.
If I could add to that as well, I mean, this can be as straightforward if we think about login and then in this particular access, it could be as simple as your online banking that you're using, and making sure that each person who has access to online banking has their own login, is using separate logins, they're not using shared logins, and there are, within a lot of online banking systems, ours included, there are specific entitlements. So whoever owns the business can actually say, well, my bookkeeper can do these things on online banking, but not necessarily access the entire online banking system for the business. So certainly reach out and be aware of what your what's available to you on even systems like an online banking system.
And then here, what we're calling audits, but really it's just looking at reports of like on the online banking. A lot of online banking platforms will tell you all the different sign-ons, who signed on and from where. So just checking those every once in a while, looking for irregular transactions or irregular sign-ins. Anybody that's like logging in at 3 a.m., that's an odd thing to do. So maybe just follow up with them. Just make sure that you are on top of your information technology systems. And then finally, practice good, what we call cyber hygiene. So your employees are definitely your most important protection against cybersecurity risks. So make sure that they're aware of best practices and they know how to avoid common pitfalls. And there are a ton of resources online. We have our Chelsea U platform where we've got all sorts of different classes about safeguarding information, about practicing good cyber hygiene. If you go to our website, you can find that there.
Sarah, I'll interject here too that we are getting releases from all of our speakers from yesterday's cybersecurity panel discussion. And so I'm going to be making that as soon as we have all the releases. That'll be on YouTube and I'll make it available to everybody to watch. We had somebody from Homeland Security and COCC and somebody from the bank and just talking about everything that they're talking about here. And how to go about doing it and what you should be doing. So I'll make that available to everybody.
Sounds like a great resource. I heard really great things about it. Okay. So the last step in risk management is monitoring and reviewing your risk. And this is a cycle. Basically, you want to look at the effectiveness of your risk management strategy and your business continuity plan regularly. You want to look for new risks. You want to look for changed risks. Maybe there are new controls available to you, whether you have a new tool in your arsenal to help prevent or protect against a risk. So do this regularly. You definitely, this is a living, breathing document. It's not something that you want to do once and then put away and forget about. This is something that you should be coming back to again and again.
And this is, you have to think about it as we were talking about what's the risk of a positive change. So new opportunities, you grew, you opened another location. All of those things come with their respective risks. So you need to then think about, well, did that affect my planning for business continuity? Do I need more insurance? Obviously, we're hoping that you're planning for all of those things in advance. But obviously, when you're implementing new things or growing, you also will discover new risks or discover new controls, as Sarah was mentioning. So it's just a process. And of course, we have written plans for all of these things. But again, scale it to the complexity of your organization. Just don't have this conversation once and never have the conversation again. That's really what we're trying to emphasize here, is just continually think about that. Oh, we want to do this new thing. Okay, that's a great opportunity. What are the risks? What controls can we put in place? So just always just put it in as part of your thought process.
And one thing that I forgot to mention when we were talking about business continuity is making sure that if you have employees or partners or people that you work with, having their contact information somewhere outside of your workspace or a backup somewhere, because if you're unable to get to where you normally keep them, if you have a paper address book and it gets lost or it gets wet or something like that, you need to have a backup. Same thing if you do have any sort of plan or you need contact information to vendors or to government agencies, just have a backup somewhere and make sure that people know where that backup is. So as I mentioned, some government agencies, we do have so many resources available to small businesses. Your bank is a really good resource because we have to do all of these things as a business. So we're pretty versed in it. The Small Business Administration offers a ton of resources for small businesses. They have a lot of stuff on risk management that you can walk through, kind of like a workbook. An audit firm or your certified professional accountant, insurance providers, professional organizations. Here in Southeastern Connecticut, we're really, really lucky. We have a ton of local economic development and small business groups, many of which I'm sure Miria has contacts with that are willing to help small businesses, a lot of times for free. So make sure to make use of those. And then if you go to ready.gov, that's a great planning site for business continuity. And no matter the size of your business, they've got really great tips for preparing for the unexpected. FCC.gov/cyberplanner is for cybersecurity planning. And we took a look at it tonight, and it looks really straightforward and easy to navigate through. And then the FTC, that's the Federal Trade Commission, they've got a lot of information about protecting your privacy and your information.
And a lot of information about fraud and scams. So
absolutely,
that's a great educational material there.
So to wrap up, there's 8 main things that you want to remember about risk management. The first is that the risks associated with small business can be characterized as internal or external. So within your power, not within your power. Begin assessing risks by listing events or resources that could impact continued operations and cash flow. So what would prevent you from making money, staying open? The cost to minimize risk should be weighed against the potential impact of the risk. So if something doesn't have a large impact for you, are you really going to put a lot of monetary resources toward it, a lot of your time towards it? No, you want to focus on the things that have a large impact to you. A business continuity plan should be part of your overall business plan. And again, I really encourage ready.gov, and they walk you through the steps of planning for an emergency. And they have ones for your family too, so household and business on there. Strategies to avoid risks can include communication, setting expectations, having the right support systems in place, training your staff, having insurance, assessing your risks, and then also contingency planning. So what are you going to do if things don't go as planned? One of the things that's really important is to be honest in reviewing your business for risk and know the warning signs. So basically you want to look at things in sort of like a worst case scenario type of way, like what's the worst possible thing that could happen and how do I prevent that from happening? It doesn't mean it will happen. It doesn't mean that you're being pessimistic. It just means that you are prepared no matter the situation. Definitely seek assistance from others. As I mentioned, there are a ton of resources available to small business owners. And then finally, revisit your risk management strategy from time to time, considering new or changed risks. Definitely keep doing that. Round and around you go. That brings us to the end of our presentation. Thank you very much. Does anyone have any questions for us?
No.
Okay.
It's a lot to think of.
I know it can seem very overwhelming, but I really do want to go back to a point that Sarah has made, and obviously one that we keep trying to stress is there's a lot of different things here, but really just think about if you go back to the internal risk page on this slide presentation or the external, think about what you do. What is your business all about? What do you need to do to stay open, as Sarah mentioned? What do you need to make sure that you're continuing to make money? And if you just sort of pick out a handful, 5 top risks, and what you're going to do about it. Even if it's like, do we have the appropriate insurance? That would be a fantastic thing to consider. Check that one off. Okay, well, we have employees. Well, what are we going to do about those employees? Do we have a talent risk? What would happen if there was an emergency? So just making some basic plans in that. You don't have to go deep dive into all of these topics by any means. Just pick the biggest ones to your operation.
Thank you.
Try to be encouraging, really. It just makes you a stronger business and a business owner.
Yeah.
I want to stress too that if you're not, we're from a risk management department, so obviously this is our lifeblood. We love this. We're used to it. But maybe hearing about it for the first time, we might sound like Debbie Downers because we're thinking about all the ways that things could go wrong. But really what we're trying to do is be creative and be prepared and make sure that we can avoid a lot of these things. That's really the emphasis. Not thinking about everything that can go wrong, but thinking about what we can do to make sure that everything goes right.
Right.
Sometimes putting the resources in and the time in for planning ahead of time actually saves you a lot in the end. So where can you make the best amount of impact in a positive way?
Right.
Well, thank you, ladies, so much for coming on and talking about risk with us. It is a a significant thing to be thinking about, because we don't all think the same way. As you do, a lot of us, we think about the things that we know. What is our business? And our business, your business is risk. My business is education. Their businesses are very different, and we don't all have the same thoughts. So that's why we all need those people in our wings to help us with things, why we need somebody to help us think about risk, why we need somebody to help us think about accounting and bookkeeping, because, I'm not an accountant. So those are the things. But thank you so much for coming on tonight and late to help us think through how we can make sure that our businesses don't get set up in a pitfall situation.